The first Overwatch League Pro-Am has come to a close, and it was honestly better than I thought it would be. I feel like all of these teams genuinely tried their best to win, and I mean, why wouldn't they when first place won the same amount of money as an APAC tournament last year? If this tournament is just a teaser of what's to come, it's going to be a banger season. The London Spitfire sucked really bad in their 3-0 loss to the Florida Mayhem. There is no sugarcoating this. They looked just as bad as they did against Atlanta in the group stage. Absolutely lost and like they should not be there. It is so weird to me that they spammed the Winston comp pretty much the whole way through except to close hold on Rialto defense. Even on King's Row, they committed to the dive. Individually, no one showed up either. I'd like to say, oh, you know, Sparker held his own, but literally this entire team was completely steamrolled with zero bright spots. What happened to the London Spitfire that were honest with themselves and recognized that they needed to play to their strengths in order to win? Don't get me wrong, they were never going to beat this Florida team anyway. Florida was just so much better, it wasn't happening. If London doesn't have this Reinhardt identity as a team moving forward, they're completely finished. The Boston Uprising suffered defeat to the Toronto Defiant, failing to complete the reverse sweep and losing 3-2. It was really close and it was a pretty decent showing, but still far below the expectations placed upon them. Twilight played extremely well and the DPS showed up mechanically for the most part, but when it came down to it, they could not match Toronto's synergy and coordination, especially in rush comps. Occasionally, Boston would string together a couple well-coordinated dives, but in general, they were disjointed and lacked cohesion. Boston's compositional choices were a bit questionable at times as well. I didn't like the Doomfist into Toronto's Diva double flex support on Hollywood. Then on Colosseo, they came out with the Bird Ring on Sojourn and Twilight on Kiriko for seemingly no reason. They got kind of owned, and then once they swapped over to their standard Cassidy and Ana picks, they brought it back and won the map. These compositional decisions point to a questionable coaching staff, confirming the fears of many when they saw the Jidset Mafia was appointed control of the team by the legend of mishandling talent himself, Supreme. This team clearly has talent and can gel together, but they aren't there quite yet. The San Francisco Shock played really well, especially considering they were playing from Korea at 6 a.m. with 200 ping in their 3-2 loss to Houston. Their dives were well coordinated, and as a team they were cohesive, but the difference maker, to no one's surprise, was Proper. His Tracer was solo carrying fights, and he straight up diffed Happy in the Widow duel to win Rialto. You could put a 20-pound weight in his mouse and he would still be the best player in the lobby on ping. The Shock backline struggled against the pressure that Fearless exerted, and it didn't help that Finn was on Moira for parts of the first two maps, but when they went up against Gargoyle in maps 3 and 4, the pressure was let up and they performed much better. I see the vision with the Moira pick because it's easier to play on ping, and when paired with Kiriko, the backline should be a lot harder to dive. But whenever you're playing against Sombra Tracer, the fade gets forced so easily and Coalescence never gets any value, so it's a tough pick. Shout out to Heesang and Vindame for playing so much better than they did in the group stages. Heesang's Hanzo was actually clean and Vindame wasn't going crazy or anything, but he was not the liability he was prior. I cannot wait for Shock to pull up to the US and show us their roster in its full glory because these guys are going to be nasty. The Atlanta Reign, the tournament favorites, got sent home early by the LA Gladiators in a 3-2 loss. Lip was orchestrating the entire operation on Sombra, and their dives were very clean most of the time, but no matter how clean they were, their backline would be traded out just as fast. Glads were tearing up Atlanta's shit while committing less resources to Kevster and coming out with similar results. The Reign also limited themselves to either Chio Lucio or Vigilante Zen with Fielder on Ana, and I get that Chio is literally the GOAT of Lucio, but I feel like at a certain point, once Kev has soloed your backline for the 5 millionth time in a match, you start to consider that maybe Brigitte is the pick. Despite this, it was not their biggest problem at all. They lost focus at key moments throughout the match, like their C9 on Hollywood, or Donghack's outrageous, treasonous act that cost them Havana. While Atlanta broke down in scrappy fights, that's when Kevster clutched up, and these lapses in judgment are the core reason Atlanta lost the series. This team is still scary, but having only 2 looks, even though these players can fill a variety of compositions at a super high level, can be called nothing but gross incompetence by the coaching staff. I fear that this is the first of many times to come of Gator failing the talent of this roster. The Toronto Defiant made it past Boston, avoiding being reverse swept and winning 3-2. Then they got got shit stomped by Florida in a crushing 3-0 defeat. The good news is their synergy is on point, they're playing to their strengths, and on an individual level, mostly everyone's looking good. Hydron continued to put in a Roll Star candidate level of work, and Speedley's Tracer was balling while Echo solo carried points, although it was forced slightly too much. UV hit some insane sleeps, OG was doing his thing, and Collusion's Winston has clearly improved, especially his juggles. The only individual gripe I have is with Sir Majed. His ult usage was suspect, and I didn't see a lot of value from his Kiriko or his Zenyatta. Part of that could be because he's still in Saudi Arabia, but stuff like ult usage is not ping related at all, so I have some concerns. What pissed me the fuck off as a Defiant fan was that they refused to adapt to the situation. They just kept running it down. Like on Rialto Attack, Merit was sitting all the way back in spawn on Widowmaker and shooting anyone who tried to take an angle on his backline, so Toronto do the only logical thing and run Tracer Echo for 4 fucking minutes. I beg you, pressure him in some way, put Hydron on Widow, send him out coast, get a Sombra in there. I really don't care. It was painful to watch, and a tragic way to see an otherwise relatively successful Pro-Am end for them. Despite their 3-2 loss against the Shock, with Atlanta and Boston out of the picture, the general favorite was now the Houston Outlaws. But that did not last long as they suffered a devastating 3-2 loss to the Gladiators. Throughout the tournament, they mostly relied on Tracer Sombra Dive with Fearless on the Winston. Their coordination was pretty good, but not crazy, and individual mechanics, especially from Fearless, bailed them out pretty heavily. When they subbed in Gargoyle, their poke was next level, with everybody on their comfort picks, but whenever he played the Diva, their dive was lacking without the Fearless factor. Shu and Violet were finding success with their aggression, making big plays, and holding their own in dive mirrors, but when they were faced with Dante's Ramantra, they were disconnected and picked off early consistently to the point of being a liability to the team for the first time. Then we get to the DPS. Pelican's Tracer was pretty solid. He followed up on dives well, made some good plays, but individually he was not near the level of a generational Tracer like Kevster. Happy is a scapegoat for Houston's early departure, and I think his Sombra wasn't great, but it wasn't what bottlenecked their run. As a team, the Outlaws did not handle LA's adaptations well at all. I do think that if Houston wants to be a tippy-top team, it is imperative that they pick up a DPS for Sombra or Tracer. Happy could be good enough to get you wins in this style, but he is much better suited to being a pure hit scan. The LA Gladiators are the story of the tournament. Everyone counted them out, including me. In Hater's Guide, I said something along the lines of everything is on Kevster's shoulders for them to make a decent run. I was kind of right because Kevster was absolutely insane, but I also counted out the rest of the team a bit too much. I had a pop-off moment every map, Babel played out of his mind, so no one should have any doubts about him now. Lastra was playing at an elite level when he came in, and Funny Astra was hitting fight-altering boops every map he got. Every single person watching this video needs to go sign the Dante apology form right now. He showed up huge, his Winston was great, and his Ramantra was the best we've seen. The Gladiators' biggest strength was in their adaptations. They are one of the only teams to actually switch up their composition based on their opponents. In their 3 times on Esperanza, they only brought out the Ram comp versus Houston and went back to Winston versus Florida, even though they had lost on it earlier in the tournament. They are confident in their reads on a match, and the coaching staff proved once again that they are one of the best in the league. I don't want to surmise the Gladiators down to Kevster being the best player in the game, but they as a team know that he is the difference maker in these matches, and that allowed them to stay away from the Sombra dive as much as possible, keeping Kai on the hit scan. Kevin is so good that he was doing as much on Tracer alone as most teams were doing with Tracer and Sombra combined. Absolutely wild stuff. The Florida Mayhem were dominant all tournament. They knew exactly which comps they wanted to play on every single map and owned on all of them. While most teams only had a couple different looks, Florida played every viable archetype in the meta except for Ramantra. Gunda cooked something for every situation, and this team is talented enough and flexible enough to make it happen with only 5 players. Everyone on this team stepped up massively. Merit did not only beat the Sojourn one-trick allegations, which were already pretty unfounded, but he did unspeakable things to them. His Sombra was fantastic, and his Cassidy was crazy. Checkmate leveled up big time on Tracer, showcased his flexibility, and was putting in the finest of work every fight. Someone is just the best tank to ever do it. No one in the league is as flexible as him at such a high level. While he might not out-micro Colluge on Sigma, his macro understanding of the game along with how he leads his team is what sets him apart from the competition. Torong's Brig and Lucio were just next level, and his flex support did not miss a beat either. But the guy who made the biggest step forward was RuPaul. The sleep sweeps this guy was hitting was unreal, and his bat was as good as it's always been. He just always found a way to keep his teammates up that I didn't even know was possible. He is such a smart player, and the way he's optimized his playstyle is unbelievable. But what's even more impressive than the individual performance of these players was their aggression as a team and how everyone was always on the same page. They're the kind of team that holds up on Ilios well. It's just their default position. They never gave the enemy any time or space, and I genuinely don't think we've seen this level of aggression and coordination in Overwatch 2 ever. I know it's just a preseason tournament, but I really think that the Florida Mayhem have something special here, and I cannot wait to see what they do in the regular season. One thing that's crazy to me about this tournament is that people were saying that because it's a preseason tournament, teams would be trying stuff out. But the teams who did the best were the ones with the widest variety of compositions. I think most teams were actually taking this pretty seriously, especially with how so many of them settled onto the Tracer Somber comp. If you've made it this far, I just wanted to say that the support recently has been awesome, and as I'm recording this, I am 27 subscribers away from 1,000, so that's pretty cool. And if you do enjoy this content, I implore you to subscribe and like this video. Have yourself a good one. Deuces.